Hello, everybody. This is Karen. We're going to get started right at the stroke of noon. I thank all of you for coming early. We're just going to wait for the other people because I do have quite a large group that's coming to this webinar today. Can I have a thumbs up or a comment in the chat if you can hear me okay? Those of you that are new to the webinars, we have this little emoji button, which is kind of fun. Yeah, I love that little emoji button. Thank you so much. And as always, I have the Q&A open. If you have any questions whatsoever, I will be doing my best to check them from time to time. So if you have any questions as we go, I do have to mute you because we have so many people on board that if I don't, we're going to get a lot of background noise. But again, if you have any questions anytime during the presentation, please feel free to type in your questions, whether they have something to do with the presentation or if you have a question about anything else. Try to stick to Zoho and maybe ACT, but hey, yeah, if you really have another question you want to ask, go for it. I might know the answer. I don't know where you're all located. I am right now in very, very rainy New Jersey. I'm thinking of building an ark. I've spoken to a couple of my friends back in Florida, and apparently their rain is dissipated, but they've had quite a bit of rain down there as well. So I hope wherever you are, it is not in Florida or New Jersey. I'm going to be trying something new because I'm getting kind of bored. This is now, gosh, I think the 12th of these webinars that I've done. So I'm going to have somebody, my teacher's pet, I like to call her. I've mentioned her a couple of times in previous webinars. Her name is Missy, or we can call her Miss Missy. And Missy is actually going to be unmuted and she is going to be making comments. Hopefully this will work. I just sprung this idea on her about 5 minutes ago. So hoping that we'll be able to have an extra person on board, which might make it kind of fun to hear some of her viewpoints and just have another person on the call with us. Now, I do have to warn you that from time to time, particularly if you're one of my more favorite clients, I will be using you as an example. Now, I usually don't use the last names. So if I pick on you and you don't like it in the future, please feel free to say, hey, Karen, don't pick on me in the future. I don't mean it in this bad way. Some of you, when you ask a question, you ask me to do something, chances are pretty good that I have at least 5 or 6 other people that have that same problem. So if I feel like, I hate to say you're one of my favorites, but yeah, I kind of use you as an example. And thanks. Feel free to make an example out of me. Thank you for that. I normally only, like I said, only pick on the people I like. I try to tell that to my husband. He doesn't believe me, but yeah, I try to do it in good humor because honestly, I hear the same things from so many of my clients. Okay, I am showing that it is a witching hour of 12. So we are going to get started. So hello, everybody. I think you all know who I am. I'm Karen. I actually had one of my clients yesterday ask me, do you guys use Zoho? And those of you that don't know, I have been an ACT consultant for over 25 years. I've been a Zoho consultant for, I think, over 8. I have used ACT. I have converted my own data from ACT to Zoho. And yes, I absolutely, positively do use ACT. I'm sorry, use Zoho. Sorry about that. Use Zoho. So this presentation we're doing today is going to be about importing and exporting. And I want to start by saying you have a lot of different options, and that's why I'm going over this today. I'm going to go over it very fast because there is a lot of information in here. We're going to start with the importing and updating options. We have migrations, we have Zoho Sheets, we have record imports, we have backups. Hey, Missy. Say hi, Missy.
Good morning.
Good morning. So Missy made it. We were just saying nasty things about you before you came on, but we'll try to ignore that. But yes, Missy's my little teacher's pet. And Missy, feel free anytime I go over anything to, Missy's always great at correcting my spelling mistakes or clarifying things when I say them in a not so great way. So Missy, anytime you feel you want to jump in, please feel free.
All right.
And you already heard that you missed the bit about I pick on the people that I like the most. So be prepared. Get your suit of armor on. And,
okay. Happy to help.
Thank you. So we're going to be going into some exporting options, exporting to Excel, using backups. I also will talk a little bit about CYA technology. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's you can fill in the blank technology. So talking about importing undos and the idea of backups. I love backups. There's so many things we can do with backups, and a lot of you don't use them. So the first question I have is, have any of you tried the ACT importer? A lot of you have come over from the ACT environment. Have any of you ever tried the ACT importer? Go ahead and put a thumbs up or a thumbs down or put something in the comments, because usually people that use the ACT importer were not real big fans. Okay, I got a thumbs down. I got a thumbs up. Okay, somebody used it and they liked it. Yeah, I got more thumbs down than ever, and than thumbs up. Now, the reason people didn't like the ACT importer, it was a bit challenging and it had limitations. So the idea with the ACT importer is it would not update existing information, only blank information. So say you're like Missy and you went to a trade show and you want to update a certain field, maybe you want to update a phone number or an address. You couldn't do it. It filled in blanks. So kind of a workaround is I'd say, well, go into ACT and blank out all that information and then do the import. Well, most of us don't really like to blank out information. So it was a workaround, but it wasn't one of my favorite workarounds. The settings were a bit confusing. They would ask you questions and people would say, what does that mean? And sometimes I wasn't even sure. There were no do-overs. If you screwed up, you restored a backup. It required a field match, but that wasn't readily visible. Nobody knew where to find it. If you needed to restore your backup, as you know, your ACT backups are kind of all or nothing. Either you're going to restore a whole entire ACT database. You can't just do a part of it. And lastly, there's no recycle bin in ACT. If you screwed something up, you were kind of up the creek without a paddle. So there's lots of ways to import or to correct your data in Zoho. We could use something called a migration. And it's kind of confusing because Zoho doesn't call it a migration. They call it an import. And it kind of bugs me because it gives us with 2 import options, but I'm going to go over the 2 of them. I call it migrations. We have Zoho Sheets, which if you have Zoho 1, you have. We have record imports, which is if you want to bring in new data to your database or if you want to update existing database in your database. And we have backups. And a lot of people think of backup, oh, well, that's in case I screw something up. No, backups are really cool ways to either clean, or update your existing data. So first thing you have to kind of say is, well, what are you trying to accomplish? When you say I want to import, what are you trying to accomplish? So we have the migration import. And again, that's something if you're migrating to Zoho from another product like Salesforce or Act, and you want to get all your data in, you want to get notes, you want to get contacts, you want to get a lot of data in. You have to understand if you're going to do the data migration, you have to understand the concept of GUIDs and have multiple related spreadsheets. More on that in a minute. We have Zoho Sheets. This is if you only want to correct a small amount of data. Maybe you have some records that you left out as status 4 and you want to update it. Maybe if somebody misspelled Fort Lauderdale, if you're in Florida, or Tallahassee. The trouble with Zoho Sheets, it is limited to 100 records. We have a record import. This is if you want to update existing records or add new ones. And the caveat here is you want to have a matching field. Why do we want a matching field? Because if we don't, we're going to end up with duplicates. And most of us, if we import data, do not want duplicates. If you do end up with duplicates, not to the end of the world, we can merge duplicates together, but it's probably easier to prevent them than to end up with duplicates. And then we have also the record import using a backup. And this is when you need to make a lot of global changes. You have over 100 things you want to fix. And these we can do 5,000 records at a time. And when we get your backups, you may have 10,000 contacts. And now you want to re-import them all again. You might have to break that backup file into 2 pieces, but it's not an issue because it's looking for duplicates. It's merging. So even if you bring that same contact in twice, it's only going to bring it in once because it's going to update the existing contact based on your matching record. A lot of stuff there. So, technical stuff. What in the world is a GUID? I talk about a GUID. Some people pronounce it GUID. It doesn't really matter. By the way, fun fact, I have on this call a very old friend from Ireland. And I have, who I assume is Irish. And then I have another very old, a longtime customer who is from the Dominican, and he happens to be Scottish. So we are a very international crowd today. So I don't know if those of you with a Scottish or Irish accent pronounce this GUID or GUID. But the bottom line is, okay, someone's laughing, and I know who that would probably be. What is it? What is a GUID? Well, according to Dr. Google, a GUID is a globally unique identifier. It's a 128-bit integer value that is used to identify unique resources. It's essentially a unique number that can be used to identify anything from a file on a computer to a record in a database. That's the operative word. When I do your ACT migrations, I don't match on emails. I don't match on names. I match on this GUID that lies in the background. Just about any CRM system has a GUID. So why in the world do I need a GUID? Why does Karen use it? What is it? Okay, here's my answer. GUIDs are used to match data. So in ACT, they're not visible. When I do an ACT migration, I need to see the ACT GUIDs, the ACT contact GUIDs, the user GUIDs, the company GUIDs, the note GUIDs, the history GUIDs. I add them to Zoho just in case. So if I miss something, need to bring in more information, I can match it on that ACT GUID. Okay? And think of it kind of like, it sounds cool. Does Zoho have them? Well, yeah, Zoho has them too, but they're slightly different. So people say, hey, you know, where do I see these GUID files? And I could tell you where to find them. And ACT, you have to have a special tool. But in Zoho, if you do a backup file, you can see every GUID in the Zoho product. And these can be used to help you import data. I know this is technical. I'm sorry, but it's just kind of the way it works. So let me see if I have a question here. And someone just said, that they did this morning. It was super easy. Yeah, it is. So when we do a backup, again, for the boys in the crowd, we can go up to the gear shift in the top right corner of Zoho. For the ladies, we call it the flower in the top right corner. And that takes us to our setup area and data administration and data backup. And we can determine when we're going to make a backup. And some of you say, wait, what? I only get 2 backups a month? That's not enough. I want you to understand this backup doesn't mean this is your only Zoho backup. Zoho works on redundant servers. It's being backed up almost every minute of the day. You don't have to worry about this. This is if you want to have these files. So I have mine set to twice a month, which is what you get with Zoho One. It's free. And I probably never really look at these files. But other people are working on cleaning up their data, and they do look at those backup files. And again, you can download them on a regular schedule. They'll be emailed to you as a zip file, or you can download them when you want them and work with them. Now, Jake was sorry, shouldn't mention names, but Jake was going to do this process, and he was a little concerned. He says, you know what, Karen, I'm going to do 2 of them in April, and then I'll do another 2 in May. I said, wait a minute, you don't have to do that. Download your backup, look at the file, make your changes, re-import your data into Zoho. Doesn't matter because any new data probably doesn't need to be updated. So these backup files are very rarely used. I do have, sadly, one client that was in the World Trade Centers, literally an attorney at 9/11. And this guy is, you can imagine, quite traumatized about data and data loss. He does pay for a backup every single day. He never uses them, but it just makes him feel safe, and I can certainly understand that. For the rest of my clients, really, they rarely, if ever, use these backups. If you ever decide Zoho isn't for you and you want to move somewhere else, there is your backup. Just download it, and there you go. So this is kind of the end of my technical part of the presentation. We're going to get a little bit more normal at this point. So when we do Act to Zoho migrations, I need to get a full Act backup, and I need to run a tool through it to get all the necessary GUIDs, and then I import it into Zoho. Okay, and again, a lot of you say, oh, I want to move to Zoho, and here, I'll give you a screenshot of my layout. No, I need to get that background because every note, every user, every contact has a GUID. And that's how we can take a note and attach it to a contact and know what user put it in. So again, can I just take an Act backup and import it into Zoho? That would be a hard no. You could do an export of your contact data, but you need special tools in Act to get to those notes. And without those various Act GUIDs, you couldn't put Humpty back together again. But in Zoho, you could, because Zoho gives you all that information in the backup. So again, repeat, GUIDs are used to match data. So if I want to have the user and a contact and a note and a history all attributed to the same person, so I know who put in the note and who put in that contact, and make sure it goes to the right contact, I need those GUIDs. And that's going to become important a little bit down the road in this presentation. So again, if I look at something, I wish they would have called this migration. If you go to your setup area, top right corner, hit the gear or the flower, go to the data administration area. We have import. I wish this said migration. Some of you are going to wander in there and you're going to go, wait, what? It shows Act. I got excited when I saw it showed Act. I'm like, what? This will take an Act backup and put it into Zoho? Oh, how cool is this? But when you click on that, it actually says, well, it only takes CSV files. And of course, those CSV files require the GUIDs. So no, that migration doesn't work for the average user. If you know Zoho, SQL Studio, it will. But on to the things you can do. When we do a migration, again, we're dealing with multiple modules. when I bring your information, I'm bringing in tasks, I'm bringing in histories, I'm bringing in act. Most of you just want to upgrade or fix your contacts. You want to bring in new contacts. You want to bring in new prospects. So Zoho 1 includes something called Zoho Sheets. It's an easy way to update your data. But the caveat is it only takes 100 records or less. So I used my own database. I don't always practice what I preach. This is my own database, and I looked at it. Anybody notice anything unusual about my data or something incorrect about my data here? Missy, what do you notice about my data on the left-hand side here?
It's a little tiny, so I'm trying to see what you're seeing.
Sorry. Yeah. You know anything about Lauderdale? And I have Fort Lauderdale, and I have
different spellings, different ways of saying.
Yeah, I have the same.
And the states are a little wonky too.
Yeah, the states are wonky. That's a technical term. And you can see that the state, I've got 0 for a couple of states. I have no idea how that happened. Couldn't have possibly been me. And I have Fort Lauderdale in 2 different ways, and I want to standardize it. So a quick way to do this is I went over up to the top right-hand corner where it says Actions, and I clicked Actions, and it says Zoho Sheet View. Like, what? Okay. So I went over to Zoho Sheet View, and you notice the first column, record ID. That's that GUID we're talking about. So this opened Zoho Sheets. All I had to do, if you know Excel, you had that little fill handle. I just took Fort Lauderdale, and I just took the, click down here, and I took the fill handle, and I dragged it all the way down. I took Florida, dragged it all the way down. All I had to do was click Save. And those changes were saved into my database. So if you're trying to clean up small chunks of your data, 100 contacts or less, pull them up on the screen, hit Actions, hit Zoho Sheets, make your changes, and you hit Save. And like a herd of turtles, it automatically corrects your database. No export, no import, just a fast fix. It is wonderful. So if you happen to go in there and notice that a lot of your contacts have the city spelled wrong, try spelling Tallahassee. Super good fix.
Yeah, I use that feature quite a bit.
Do you? What's an example of what you've tried to clean up?
Similar to what you did, but sometimes I'm changing someone's ID status, or we classify people different ways. We work in speech therapy, so someone may graduate from being a clinical fellow to an SLP. So it's just an easy way for us to do a quick cleanup. Yeah, and you can then, if you want, save it as an Excel file to share with somebody else. So that part makes it undynamic, but I have done that as well.
So it's just a really nice feature. People say, hey, how do I export? Again, the caveats, you're only going to get 100 at a time. So it's not going to be for everybody, but it's really cool. So here, in case you wondered what Missy looks like, and then I also have another one of my buddies, Jake. I took some little screenshots of them so you can see what they look like. So here are 2 data scenarios that they had. So Missy, and Missy, correct me if I've got it wrong here, she goes to multiple events and needs to update data in Zoho. She wants to import that information, but she's really nasty. She says, Karen, I don't want to have duplicates. Did I kind of get that right, Missy?
Yep, that's true. We might meet somebody at a conference, and then we do a university presentation and we get them again. So I want it to flag those people for me.
Right. So she's getting this list from the trade show or whatever. She wants to import and avoid duplicates. Jake had another problem. Jake has a lot of problems, but this particular problem was he had a drop down. Jake, would you write in the Q&A? I think you had. Did you tell me like 80 items in the ID status drop down? Or was it the lead status? Do you remember? Okay. Jake, are you there? We went anywhere from 20 to 100 options in our drop downs due to bad practices in the act. Think of that. Drop down list, I usually tell you 6 to 18 items. He had over 100 in some of his drop downs. And where did they come from? They came from ACT. So Jake kind of took over and he said, yeah, this isn't going to work. And Jake, what did you scale that down to? Like 4? So he wanted to be able to scale that down from this horrendous mess in his drop downs. And he had well over 5,000 contacts. So to do it 100 at a time through that Excel sheet or that Zoho sheet would be horrible. So he needed to clean it up. So let's work with Miss Missy first. They both had solutions. They both ended up using module imports. Missy used module import, the contact import, but made sure she had a matching field so she wouldn't get duplicates. She matched on the email field. Jake had more than 100 records to clean up. He used a Zoho backup file. He didn't get a spreadsheet from a trade show. He got it from his backup and then re-imported it back into Zoho ID, or I'm sorry, back into Zoho using that Zoho ID field. So Missy, what she really had to do was look at her import spreadsheet and take a good look at that import file and make sure that each row had an email address. Why did she have to make sure that each row in her import file had an email address? Because she wanted to match it to the existing records and make sure that she didn't get duplicates. And Jake just said, hey, he paired his drop downs from 20 to 100 down to under 10. So you get an idea. So she just looked at her imports, made sure she had an email address, and she used that contact import, which I'm going to show you in a second. By default, in Zoho, the email address is a matching field. So it's very easy. You're going to do an import. Just make sure all your imports have email. It's not going to be 100% foolproof. People do have multiple emails. But again, if you find those down the road, you can merge them together. But that's probably your safest bet when doing an import of new data. Jake used the Zoho record ID. That's good. How did he find the GUID? Well, when he did the backup, lo and behold, the GUID was part of that file. So Jake's solution, again, he went to the backup and he downloaded a backup. And when he got the file, it comes as a zip file. Axe backups are also zip files, but you can't look at them quite as easily. In Zoho, the backup files have all these different files in here. So if you really wanted to you could work with your leads, you could work with your contacts, you could work with your accounts, make the changes, re-import it. So in Jake's case, he worked with the contacts. And again, when he got that backup file, he had the record ID and the contact owner ID. I threatened him with death if he removed those columns. And he's quite afraid of me. I'm quite a bit bigger than he is. So he said, okay, won't get rid of those columns, Karen. But he went into the other things like the lead source and the ID status. And he used all the cool little Excel tools, the edit replace and the filtering. And he changed everything. And again, he took it down from 100 down to under 10. I'm not going to say it took him minutes, that it was easy, but it was probably the easiest way to clean up probably 20 years worth of old ACT data. Now, once it was done, both Missy and Jake used the same feature. They went up to the contacts, and if you go into your contacts, you see that big blue button that says create contact, but they bypassed it and hit the drop-down arrow, and it says import contacts. So then when you go over to that screen, it says, okay, either drag and drop it, so you can take the file and just drag it over, or you can hit browse and browse to your file. It will actually take a CSV or an Excel file, whichever you like. I tend to work in CSV, but if you're more comfortable with some of the fancier things in Excel, that's fine. And then it's going to make you map the field. So like in Missy's case, she might have had a field that was called attendee's email address, and she needed to map it to the email field in Zoho, and she might have had a field called planning, and she's, oh, I'm going to map that to the attendance field in Zoho. Jake's was pretty easy because he didn't change any of the column headings. He changed the data, but he didn't change his column headings. So he was a little bit easier there. And Jake just said, oh, by the way, Kieran, it took about 3 hours of me to massage that data in the CSV file. Yeah, because again, to take 3 hours to fix 20 years worth of bad data ain't too bad. As he says, it was a small price to pay for a functional database. When you import, you do get a caveat, and that caveat is saying you're not going to be a spammer. Some of you go out and buy lists from InfoUSA or other sources. You want to import them in. You got to realize there are spam rules in play if you're buying lists. There are products that I've spoken about before, like I talked about Bouncify in our last session, to go over and make sure your email addresses aren't bouncing, because if you bounce too many, you could be marked as a spammer and blacklisted. So they do make you say, hey, I'm not spamming. I didn't just buy this list and bring it in. Okay, I know some of you are going to kind of cross your fingers when you click off this, but they are going to say, hey, make sure you're not a spammer. Obviously, Missy and Jake were cleaning up their own data. They were not spammers. Okay, my next client shall remain nameless. Every time I speak to him, I don't know what I like better, his name or his Scottish brogue. But I don't know, but Missy and Jake are probably too young to recognize. Missy, do you know who that is? That picture is?
Steve McQueen?
Oh my God. I thought you were too young to know. Yes, but we didn't hear Missy say that because we don't want to reveal the name of any of my clients. But yes, that would be a name. And he'd like to start using the Zoho account feature. He never used the company feature in ACT. Okay. For those of you that used ACT for a long time, you know that company feature went through a lot of changes. It wasn't there if you started using ACT many years ago. We didn't have a company feature. We had a company field. Then they added that company feature. It was confusing. People didn't understand it. It was misused. So it was kind of a mess. And so when I brought over Steve's data, his solution was just a little bit harder because ACT provides us with a list of company data. If you were using the company records in ACT, which some of you were, probably, I'm going to say 75% of you were not. It also makes up a list based on the contact field and the contact and the company field and the address information you have on your contacts, but it's not always accurate. Like in Missy's case, Missy had a lot of contacts that did not have associated companies. So Missy, what did it created fake? Do you remember what your fake company names were, like Home or something crazy? Remember what it was?
I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, to me, companies were pretty useless in ACT, but accounts are not. So.
Right. So she wanted to use accounts, but it's a great example. We tried to bring in the data, but it was just kind of a mess. So we did have to, we had a choice of bringing in one pile of mess or bringing in the other pile of mess. She hand used companies. Steve hand used companies. We could pull something together from the contact list and just kind of play with it and wing it. But either way, it kind of makes a mess. So, again, the choices are, I could give you that company, the true company list. In Steve's case, but he had none. Or he could actually import his own company list. Like he might say, well, you know what? I have an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to bring in the companies myself. I have a list of my companies. The problem is that we need to match those companies or accounts, as they're called in Zoho, back to the contacts. That was kind of Missy's issue. She needed to, the accounts was a great feature, but she needed to kind of recreate those accounts and match them back to the contacts. So if you do have a list, either one list that I provide you, a list that you create yourself out of ACT or another source, we can create them in, and we can link them to our contacts in Zoho. But what we really need is something to match them with. So when we add them, and again, we go up to accounts, we go import accounts, we can add new accounts or we can update existing accounts. If we're adding them, we can match them. If I did an import, I always kind of leave you with this ACT good. So if you have that, we can match to that. If you used a Zoho backup, we can match to that. But what it wants to do when you go in here is, do you want to match it to a contact? In order to match it to a contact, you want to match it to either a contact ID if you have it, that ACT Legacy ID if you have it, or the email. That's how you're going to get that imported account list to match to your existing contacts, so that you don't have them just standing alone. You want them to be matched back to your contacts. Usually, if you could get me a list, put in an email address, we could use that. We can bring in your company records, match them to emails, and go off like a herd of turtles. So the other thing that's important to know is that you can actually get a status and you can undo an import. So again, if you screw things up, it's not the end of the world. Zoho is very, very forgiving. So when you go again to set up, the upper right corner, hit the flower or the gear shift, go down to data administration, go to import, go over here to the import history. And what's cool, it's going to tell you, well, gee, we added this field, we imported this field. It's going to tell you how many new records you added, how many records you updated, and how many you skipped. Because a lot of times, those of you coming from the ACT environment, you did ACT imports and said it worked, but then you said, well, I'm getting new contacts. Nothing got updated. It's like, what happened? And you're just kind of left scratching your head. Here we get an import history, and it's cool because if I screw things up from time to time, I hit a wrong button, I do something wrong, I can go in here and see what was skipped, and I can click on that, and I can actually even download it as a spreadsheet, and it will give me a list of the records it skipped and the reason why they were skipped. So like in Jake's case, he might import 10,000 records and it might skip, I don't know, 20, 30. He can go in there and see why it skipped those 20 and go back and figure out what the reason is. And you can also undo imports. Okay, exports, name your poison. And I'm sorry, we're probably running over a little bit because I have a lot of information this time. So exporting your data, we could do that a number of ways. We talked about Zoho Sheets. But again, like Missy said, she took her Zoho sheet and she saved it as an XLS file. So even people that aren't using Zoho could see the information. The caveat there, 100 records. And for some of you, that just ain't enough. Okay. I like to do backups. If I do backups, I get everything. So my backups, I can give people the module I want, save it as Excel file, get rid of the columns I don't need. And now, I can filter down if I need it and get rid of, whatever I want. And I've got an easy Excel spreadsheet that I can give to anybody outside of my organization. We can also export. Now, exports require a dynamic group, as we call them in ACT, or a list view, as we call them in Zoho. I have covered list views in prior presentations, and some people kind of underestimate the importance of a list view. Never underestimate the power of a woman or of a list view in Zoho. If we want to do an export, again, you're going to hit your little rosebud or your gear shift in the top right corner, go in the setup area, go to data administration, go to export. And if you export your data, it's going to ask you what module. You export your data one module at a time. Do you want to get your accounts out of there? Do you want to get your leads out of there? Do you want to get your contacts out of there? And then it's going to ask you for a custom list view. And you can pick whichever custom list view you want. That will be the part of your data. So if you're looking to take this data to Constant Contact, which I hope you are not doing, You might have a custom list that's based on they have an email address and they haven't opted out. And then you could export the contact, like in this case, the Zoho users group. You could go in and exclude fields and say, oh, I only want certain fields and exclude all the others. To me, that's kind of a waste of my time. I tend to do the export and just, keep the columns I need and, give it off to somebody. But that's how we can export. The maximum number of records you can export is 200,000 records. If you need more than that, you can just get your whole backup. I don't know anybody on this call that has over 200,000 accounts or contacts. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong, but there you go. And someone just said, probably Jake, I did not know that I could see the skipped value for the import. Out of 40,000 records that I corrected this morning, I have 8,000 that were skipped. Yeah, it might have been, if I was to guess, Jake, we had to take your file and we had to divide it into two pieces for 5,000 records. I'm thinking there might have been an overlap. So those 8,000 skipped records might have been just a bit of an overlap. But again, look at the reason why they were skipped, and that'll tell you. And you could go back and take that spreadsheet of skipped records and actually use that as another import. So, hey, there's all kinds of things we can do. Alrighty, my key takeaways from this meeting. There are several ways to import and export. I think you understand the importance of matching fields and GUIDs. You learned a new vocabulary word, and understanding the usefulness of the backup files. So let me know what you've discovered in Zoho. And please let me know what you'd like to cover in the future. My next few meetings, again, they're always on the second and the fourth Wednesdays. My next one's going to be working with templates, which is going to be May 28th. I think I'm going to do creating reports, and I'm going to have Missy comment on that in a minute, on June 11th. And I think on June 25th, I'm going to call this either tips or tricks, or maybe basic features that now that you've been using Zoho a while, you may have overlooked. And again, I'm putting a $sign there because I'm giving a finder's fee for whoever comes up with some of the best tips, because I want to hear what you guys have been doing. Missy, I'm going to turn this over to you for a minute. Do you have any comments about anything you've discovered in Zoho or your thoughts in random?
Sure. What I was going to say, as far as the imports go, it's taking me a few tries, and I love that feature that tells me what it skips. So if it skips 2 people, I might keep it, and if it skips half of them, I go, what did I do wrong? I just click the button and say undo, and poof, it goes away, and I can start over with a clean slate. But that's definitely saving me a ton of time. I used to hand enter tickets that came, even if they were digital, sometimes would hand enter it into Act or Zoho, and it took me days to get everything in. So even if I have some glitches, I get it in, within an hour usually. So that's a super big time saver. We are super heavy field users. So it's been really nice how easy it is to add a field, to change, like go add something to a drop-down list. It was so complicated in Act. You had to do it on the web version. It didn't always hold. It would lock the database, do all this crazy stuff. And I can just pop over to that flower Karen keeps talking about and go into my canvases and make changes, in a couple of seconds and be back doing what I was doing. So that's a huge thing. Integrating your contacts with your clients, which are accounts, with deals that you have pending, that's been really good for us too. We're still figuring out how to use that best. I ended up, we either have speech therapists who we're trying to hire, or we have school districts that we're trying to work in. So those are our accounts, really, the school districts. So I might have 5 people from the district. I created a field called primary contact, so I know which one is like the main one when I go into their contact record. So there might be other things I save there. I recently was able to use the reports feature and output something that we wanted to see some things that were both related to a deal and were related to the contacts in one place. And the report was able to generate that for me. So there's I find there's just so much power in Zoho. It's just, we keep uncovering things that we can use it for. And we're really working towards, working smart and using fields and not exporting things that are going to have to be hand created. But definitely glad we made the change, and you can't be in better hands than with Karen. I've gone to every single one of these webinars because I learned something every time. So now I'm excited to learn how to do backup changes because I didn't know that was an option. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Missy. And one other question, and sorry, I literally emailed Missy, she's in California. So probably the first thing the board that you saw was, hey, Missy, would you mind speaking a little bit on the webinar today? And of course, she was probably thinking, no, I really would prefer not to because I have 7,000 other things on my plate. But she's like, sure, I'll speak in. So, I mean, this was not prepared. She just kind of had 5 minutes notice because even now it's still quite early in California. So I do thank her. And Missy, I do have one other question. She reached out to me this weekend and she says, oh, by the way, I'm having trouble. I'd like to create a report. Missy, how long did it take? I gave you an email, or actually you tell me, how long did we spend in training you how to make reports, and how long did it take you to figure out how to create a report?
Not very long, honestly. Like, you gave me the path. So you had suggested that I go, you said I only had 2 modules I was trying to connect together. So contacts is a module and deals is a module. Most of the fields I wanted were in the contact records. So you told me to make the contact the parent and the deal the child. And then I had all the options that I wanted available to make columns on the report. And then I just kind of organized them in the way that I wanted, and presto, it was a report. So it's, I need some guidance, but Karen's always really willing to give that. And then I was able to do it by myself. So it's much more user-friendly, I find. And I can Google many, many things and get an answer as well. But, I always use Karen because she's the wizard, I call her.
Thank you. And the thing about reports, if you ever try, Missy, did you ever try to make a report in ACT?
I don't think so, honestly. I mean, we used the like the spreadsheet version of ACT, that would give you the contact lookup area, not the detail pages. We would just customize those. But you had to change them all the time, all those columns. Like, I think one thing Karen said was, don't underestimate the view. With the view, you can lock your columns. So it's a better way to not have to redo things.
And because the report writer in ACT was horrible. And there are 2 things I love about, and that's why I'm going to cover reports in a future webinar. 2 things that I love about reports is, one, they're just so easy to do. And if there's a ton of reports that come out of the box, you can create reports. And if that's not enough, if you're using Zoho, 1, you also have analytics. But 2, they're what we call drillable. You can actually, when you run a report, in ACT, it was like a piece of paper. In Zoho, when you run your report, you could drill down. So if you see someone's name, you could drill down into that name. So if you see something you don't like, drill down into the name, make the change, and now your report's been updated. So I just love that feature. And that's something I don't think a lot of people that came from ACT are used to using. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions here. And I'm glad I answered. Jake, thanks for being such a good sport. At least he learned something. He was having trouble, and he saw that a reason why some of those records didn't update. So here's the deal. Please take these webinars. Even Missy and Jake are probably 2 of my more advanced users. They all learn a little something because and I learned things preparing these webinars. So I so appreciate all of you for attending. I appreciate Missy for helping me. And I look forward to seeing you on May 28th. In the meantime, if you have questions, I'm always here to help. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Karen.